The following is a conversation with Dodge Keir, an Australian hunter, hunting guide, as well as international hunting booking agent and man of faith. In this episode, Dodge and I have a discussion around truth and hunting and the hunting community and the interaction of truth within that community. How far is too far when you're exaggerating the success of a hunt or how big the game animal is? Is it okay to lie, even white lies, when it comes to hunting? Or should we call out the lies that we do see? We also discuss the interaction of faith in hunting and the synergies and the conflicts that exist within that system, as well as silence. The beauty of silence, but also how silence can make hunting difficult. I encourage you, if you want to support this podcast and support yourself, go check out the Australian Hunters Club, australianhunters.com.au. It is a fantastic way to engage in a hunting community, get access to free member-hosted hunts, go in the draw to win monthly free guided hunts, and a whole bunch more. You can check it out at australianhunters.com.au. But without further ado, on to the conversation with Dodge. So, Dodge, the African proverb says this: until the story of the hunt is told by the lion, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So my question to you is this: how important is truth in hunting, or what role does the truth play in hunting?
I think that's a great question, and definitely one that I feel passionately about. I get this, it's a complex when it comes to people that are, let's say, anti-trophy hunting or something that along those lines, and they might be, oh, you know, that doesn't count because you didn't shoot it in that free range. Or I have no issue with where people shoot things. If it's legal and legitimate, I'm all for it. But if they lie about it, then that's what really irks me. And I've seen it, you know, I shot this big stag, whatnot, but it was behind fence and they're claiming it as free range. And I think it really devalues the sport or the industry, and also what they're trying to achieve by lying about it and not be truthful to themselves. I don't see any lesser value in that. I know some people think a state forest stag's worth 20 times what a private stag is, but you know, there's value in both for different reasons. So I'm definitely one that enjoys telling the truth about my hunt, irrelevant of whether it was a good one or a bad one. I'll tell you how it went. I'm just honest about that. I often refer to my wife as a sledgehammer because she, you know, just smashes you with the truth all the time, and it's definitely something that's rubbed off on me a little bit.
That's so true. Wives are really good for knocking you down a few pegs and reminding you that you're human, and
we definitely need it.
Yeah, I think especially as hunters, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because I see it all the time where there's boasting or kind of lengthening of the truth or stretching of the truth or just flat out lying, and it irks hunters, especially the more experienced hunters. Do you think why do you think it irks hunters so much when they smell a lie or they smell that that lack of authenticity? Is it because it takes so much work to go out and get these animals and learn their behavior?
Yeah, definitely. And I just don't understand the goal behind the lying part of it. And poachers do it, you know, obviously lie where they got it from, but I don't know what's to gain from it. And I think maybe some people lie because they feel they'll be judged if they tell the truth and say, I shot this behind fence, or I shot this on an estate, or the other one that I get regularly, or I see regularly online, is I shot this cull deer. Well, was it a cull, or did you just shoot it because it was the only one you found or the first one you found? And I'm always honest to say I shot this head, and that's what it is. Like whether it's a cull or not, I chose to shoot it. So yeah. I have to own up to that, and I don't need to justify that to anyone else. I chose to shoot it. So that's my decision for my reasons. And I might have shot it because I wanted meat and I don't care what the antlers look like, but I'm never going to lie about that and try and justify it. So, yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting, and I don't think social media has made that any better. I know a lot of people have been caught out in their lies through social media.
Yeah.
Have you, talking about that, did you see the media article that came out yesterday about the guys caught fishing, putting weights in their fish in America, in competition fish?
No, they were putting what? And they were releasing the fish.
It was a walleye fishing competition, and these two guys had previously won several competitions amounting to $300,000 US in prize money. Like, we're talking big stuff. And there's a video of this circle of guys around him with his bucket of fish, and the organisers are screaming at him, cutting open the fish and pulling out of their stomachs sinkers, fish fillets, anything they could use to weigh it down. And I get the pressure that's on these people to... that's obviously different because it's a competition, and that's not what we're doing here for hunting. But I can understand the pressure that people are under, and I know you do your YouTube stuff, and when people head down the pro staff and the sponsored side of things, there's that pressure to regularly produce content, regularly produce good content, and sometimes that has forced people to lie about where they got it or what they did or when they got it, or it's the old "how big was your fish" scenario. It's everyone can add a little. I say mayo. Anyone can add mayo to a story, but it's
is it okay to add mayo? How much mayo is okay? I guess that's part of the question that I want to know. Is does that change over time as well? Like, at the start when you're first starting to hunt, is it okay to kind of add a bit of mayo? But as you get older and more experienced and more access and you get better at it, is it become less okay that you season your hunts?
Yeah, well, seasoning's a good term too, but the old adage of never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I think that depends on your audience. If I'm sitting around the campfire telling my mates a story, you add a little mayo to it for dramatic effect or whatnot, but I'm not lying about the major details. All I'm saying is that, I stalked into 20 meters when it was probably more like 150 because I was lazy or whatnot. But I'm not taking away from the animal or from the hunt. I'm embellishing it, but I would never do that in let's say a public situation or a public forum where I'm on here on your podcast or on ours or whatnot. I'm always trying to be truthful, because the problem with laying these things down on the interwebs is you're accountable. It's there forever.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Well, I even felt the pressure when being on your podcast. And for those people that don't know, Dodge is a co-host on a fantastic new hunting podcast, Endless Pursuits.
Correct.
And we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to Dodge, because there's some things that came up during that conversation that kind of, I don't know, just spurred me to think a bit more, especially about the truth in hunting. And I felt the pressure when talking to you guys, even though it was a very relaxed and casual conversation, to not necessarily embellish, but you're on the spot, right? And when you're on the spot, you need to have, basically all you can fall back on is either your wit, your ability to think quickly, or the rock bottom truth. And depending on how skillful you are at speaking, as you can use a bit more mayo and get away with it a little bit more convincingly. And my issue is that, and I've had this issue for a long time, is that because I can be charismatic, because I can be interesting, because I can engage in conversation quite well, I have not a temptation, but I can lie if I want to. And I've gotten away with it in the past. And it's a real issue, is because at the same time, I value authenticity. But like you said, there's a pressure to create interesting content, to be an interesting person. And you don't want to compromise your ethics. You don't want to compromise your values, and especially in something like hunting. And so I even felt the pressure when speaking to you, and we're talking to you about, how long have you been hunting? And you kind of you plus 6 months, or you plus a year on, or you whatever.
Round up, round down.
Yeah, and it's why do we feel the need? Especially, I'm curious to speak to women about this, and I haven't spoken to as many women as I would like to about this topic. I wonder whether it's a uniquely difficult thing for men, or whether it crosses the gender line and everything in between, because we come from this hunter-gatherer, evolution, and not to simplify it. Twisting my words, but we come from this hunter-gatherer culture where men have been conditioned to want to achieve and
produce,
and produce and conquer and build, and we receive praise for that, and then we get a lot of sense of value from that praise. I often say this to my wife, is that I don't need for you to tell me that you love me. I know that you love me. What I need from you is like praise and respect, and that's what I thrive on. And when you give me those things, I feel good. I feel justified. I feel valued. Do you think that's part of what drives this unhealthy culture in hunting?
That's a long question to unpack.
Yeah, it's a very long question.
On the final part there, have you looked into different love languages? Talking about
yes,
you and your wife.
I have.
So my wife and I are extremely different. And I don't like it. Obviously works in some way, but I'm real touchy feely, and I like those words of affirmation and the touch and praise. And she's more acts of service. She comes home to a clean kitchen, she's just swooning. But I work all day and she beats me home. She comes home,
the dishes are done, you got the oven mitts on. She's like, oh my goodness.
And she's away this weekend, and this will go to air long after. She probably won't even listen to it, so I'll probably be safe. But even if she does, it'll be long after the glow's worn off. But I had the house cleaner come in the first day she left and clean the whole house. And then I've relegated myself to 2 rooms so I can maintain a cleanliness level.
Oh man, that's such a man thing to do.
And she will come home and be super excited and happy that those things are done. I hope.
That sounds like exactly something that I would do. It's like you could be, intentional about cleaning the house as you go, or you can just restrict yourself to one room. And it's like, I'll do that.
Yeah, I'll take that option. Because I was busy and I worked. The reason for staying home this weekend while she went over with the kids was I just had so much work on. But so getting back to your question, when you were on our podcast and things, it was great having you. And I didn't get a sense of your embellishing the story, but I understand. And I catch myself saying things like I referenced, and it wasn't your episode, but another reference was I ate fox. Now that's another story. I won't get into that. But I said in the story that I took the backstrap and I cooked the backstrap. And it's not until I listened to the audio today, actually, it came out today, but that I remember actually it was the leg. Why did I even say backstrap?
Yeah.
So my brain was just so quick to turn that story, and I don't know whether it made it any better or worse, but my brain did that without me thinking consciously. And I think when we're verbalizing these things, it's a lot of subconscious things. You're right. We round up. We, round up to the nearest factor, or we just push it up that little bit. It never rounds down. We never tell the story and say that a deer was further away than what it was.
Yeah, well, I had someone that I trust and love and respect deeply listen to the podcast that we did on your podcast. I didn't ask him to. I didn't send him the link. He just
thank you for being a listener. Yes.
Yeah. I can't tell his name, so he can't get the praise. But he was listening, and he messaged me immediately and said like, you kind of rounded up, and I'm really disappointed in you. And like those words, like they're the words you hear from like your parents,
what
right?
What stories did you round up?
No. Well, are we going to really go that deep?
Well, I listened to your 10-minute. You said you're going to turn over the rocks that are awkward.
No, you're right. Look, thank you for calling me on that. Yeah. So the years that I've been hunting, I rounded up. Within a year, I rounded up, and I don't know why. And I think because, and I've actually released a video just, I think it released for members of the hunting club the other day, but it releases to everyone else in the world this coming Saturday, which is a reflection on my time in South Australia and the lessons I learned there. And it's talking about primarily just some conflict I've had recently with the branding, the Australian Huntsman, and not conflict from anyone outside of the world or of the interwebs. It's conflict within myself regarding
that you name yourself after a spider.
No, not at all. The fact that it's like the Australian Huntsman. It's not a Australian Huntsman. It's not a hunter. It's not like a mediocre hunter. It's not one of the boys. It's like the Australian Huntsman. And exactly. And in this video, I talk through like my mindset I had when I came up with that name, and my background in marketing and in in theology, thinking about identity and stuff, and where that kind of the mechanisms in my mind that formulated that name. But then also I talk about whether that name's healthy, whether it's setting me up for success, whether it's true, whether it's honest, and all these different things. But I think because I've taken this very strong brand, I then feel the pressure to act like I've been hunting for 40 years, even though I clearly haven't been. And
have you considered changing the name?
I did. Well, one of the reflections that came. Well, I don't want to spoil the video for anyone who wants to watch it. I don't know. I'll just spoil it. Whatever.
When's this podcast coming out?
This will come out afterwards, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I'll just spoil it for all the people who aren't first in, best dressed. The conclusion basically is that I am not an expert hunter. I've never claimed I am, by the way, but I'm not an expert hunter. I'm not a professional hunter. I don't even think I'm a very good hunter. I'm certainly not the Australian Huntsman, but I want to be. And I want to grow into that name. And I hope that the community with me will grow into that name as well, that we would be the Australian Huntsmen and women inclusively. And so I'm not going to change it, but it's with that mindset that I want to grow into this name. And I hope that I can do the name justice and honor it for what it is. And look, honestly, if I had a lot of flack from people calling into question that name, I potentially would change it. But no one has so far. It was just been my own internal conflict. But
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
So I don't feel that, rounding up or down your years of hunting is a major one, but do you feel that a white lie
I'm scared now.
and a lie are the same thing?
Yes. Well, it depends. Okay, so are you asking?
Yeah.
Well, so there's levels to what you're saying. So are you saying a white lie and a lie are the same in terms of the severity of their ethical consequence, or are you talking
deceitful to the person you're saying it to? Either way. So, and I'll give the context. I am a fan of a white lie, and I personally choose those times when I use it, obviously, and I have my reasons for them, and it's either to soften the blow to someone. Does that, did I do a good job? Yeah, you did okay.
Does my bum look big in this dress?
Yeah, it does. That's a white lie. It looks huge. So, yeah, I choose those times. But my wife is of the opinion, again, we'll probably get into this later, but we're both men of faith and our family's quite faithful and whatnot. And to her, if I say that there's 6 spoons in the drawer when really there's 7, and I did that on purpose, that's the same thing as saying I'm at home tonight when I'm actually out with the boys. Or there's to her there's no level, and it's just across the board the same thing. And I do get that. I understand that, and I probably have previously been a lot more selfish than I prior to being married to her than I am now because of that. I'm a bit better person, and relationships are supposed to make you a better person. If they're not doing that, what's the point? So I thank her for that, and I just wanted to know your opinion on, that we're talking about truth and things. Is the opposite, is a lie, are all lies the same?
So
that's a long question.
It's a long question, but I have an answer. Over the years, I've really developed and kind of molded my understanding of the way that the world works, and I've kind of split it into 2 spheres. One is the abstract, absolute, truth, which is there's right and wrong, there's good and evil. Things have an absolute value, and that's the way it exists. And these are kind of really good ideals and values to aspire to and to hold yourself accountable to and to live by. And then there's the other sphere of life, which is kind of grown as I've gotten older, which is the grey, which is, well, that's all well and good, Chris, but this is how the world works. These are the consequences for different actions, whether you think that they're absolute or not, whether you believe that one is worse than another or whatever, or they're all equal or not. This is the reality of how it works. And so I live in a world, and I act in a world in this world where both of these spheres exist. And so if you ask me whether white lie is as bad as a lie, I'll tell you in a philosophical sense, they are exactly the same and they hold the same weight. But if you ask me how does a white lie interact differently in the world with a full-on lie? Then the answer is yeah, of course, and it all depends on context, and it depends on what your motivation is. And I mean, for instance, I can tell you that my wife died last week, and because I'm feeling down and I want pity and I'm unstable mentally and I feel like I need that. Or I can tell you that my wife died because I'm angry and malicious and I hate my wife. Like, I think you would respond really differently to if those different motivations were revealed, you'd treat me differently based on either of those. And so,
firstly, my condolences, and I'm surprised you're doing a podcast if that was the case. It was a very deep option to choose.
I know.
You could have said my dog died.
My brain, my brain did a little, Chris, really? And then it's like, okay.
Well, you've said it now.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Could have added a little bit of you could have done a mayo on that story, I tell you.
Yeah, it could have been a little bit of salt and pepper, not the full.
For the record, your wife is well and good.
She is very happy, and I love her, and we have a very healthy relationship. Let it be known in the court that this is the truth,
but
regardless of what happens.
I understand what you mean. Definitely the context and what the person saying the lie is trying to either gain or mitigate from saying the lie needs to be taken into context.
Well, so bouncing off that, before we were talking about the motivation to lie as a hunter and whether it's healthy or not, and whether the responsibility to tell the truth changes as you get better at hunting. Do you think? I think a lot of the reasons why new hunters lie is because they want to fit in. They want to be part of the group. They want to be part of the community, and they feel the need to justify their position in that community or impress, and therefore they tell these lies like oh, I got a deer last week, or yeah, I got a massive red stag, and it was this many points, or whatever. Do you think? Here's a deep question for you. Do you think it's better to lie and try to develop, let's say, white lies? Let's clarify. Do you think it's better to tell white lies in an attempt to create and foster relationships, or to stay silent and isolate?
I don't think they're the only two options.
If you had to choose.
I'm not a silent person. So if I was forced to lie to talk to people, then that's your only option. I don't. How about a third option of to tell the truth and slowly foster relationships instead of speedily foster? I don't think the relationships you're fostering with, I don't think the relationships you're fostering with those people are the right ones, because at some point they're going to realize you're catfishing them, and you're going to get caught out, and it's worse.
What is that? What's that scent of a lie? How do hunters? Is it as simple? Is it the little things, the little tells? Like you said that you were in state forest, and yet I see like a fence line behind you in a pine plantation, or in that picture, or like what do you think are the ways that people
Some
smell
things
out
to look
those
for?
lies? Well, not. Let's not create a guide for like. But I mean, what in your experience, when you've smelt something fishy, and what has it been?
Well, I think to be a good liar, you need to have a really good memory, and I have a terrible memory. So I do lie in life. I'm not particularly proud of it. Definitely do it. We all do. But I have a terrible memory, so I'm quite easily caught out. And I think if I ever smell that in someone else's story, it usually comes from a lack of, lack's the wrong word, excess detail in areas where it shouldn't be, because they're trying to make up the story, or a lack of detail in area that would be true if that happened. So
even in a social media post, do you think?
We definitely don't see it, but if you delve into it, I've never called people out for lying publicly. I've definitely messaged and said, hey, would you mind telling me about that story a little more? It's pretty interesting. In my mind, thinking that I want to find out what happened there. And I personally have one situation where I saw someone's story on Facebook, and I'm like, I know that track behind you, and I know there's no one supposed to be on that property this weekend, because that's a property I have access to and you don't. So I didn't go directly to that person. I took that screenshot to the farmer and just asked. I said, they might have had a friend or something on there that I didn't know about. And then once I found out that he's like, no, he knows who the person was and they're definitely not supposed to be on there. But just that little detail of the track got them unstuck. But that's only because I had driven up it 3 weeks prior. It's not because I did any research or anything. So social media is definitely very easy to hide those details. But one thing I do look for is just people who are overly successful. Hunting's not a slam dunk. There's not people... That's a lie. There you go. I didn't tell a lie. I just said something I shouldn't have said. There is people that are regularly successful, but it's due to hard work. And that if I see someone pop up out of nowhere that's just very successful, I don't initially question that, but I think a little bit like, oh, yeah, geez, they've got some good access. Geez, they've got some real good access. Geez, that's amazing. Like every week, dear. And I've thought that in the past, and then someone called them out on it, and they clarified and said, we just got Facebook. These are just the last 10 years worth of photos. And so, there's always context, and I'm never one to jump on someone's photo and say, you're a liar, prove us wrong.
Well, do you think there's a responsibility to like? So, I have this issue where I'm a massive fan and advocate for community, and we can talk about more of that because there's obviously an interaction between community and faith and the value in it. But I really want to see positive Australian hunting communities all over the country. That's one of my goals in life, is to try and foster as many of them as I can. And I think one of the really important mechanisms that operate within community is accountability. And so when we have the poor man's community or no community at all, which is basically social media, is there a responsibility on seasoned hunters to call out the lies? Let me give you an example. I was out hunting a couple of weeks ago with a guide, actually, and we were talking about other guides in the country, especially in that area. And then I mentioned one particular guide, and he had a very strong response to how he felt about that guide and that guide's actions, and more specifically, not his actions as a guide or as a hunter, but the way that he treated social media. And the more I dug into it, basically this person's frustration or issue was that this guide that he has frustrations with posts every single day, and will sometimes post the same deer, like the picture of the same deer on multiple days. So like different shots, but it's the same deer. And to be fair, the guide isn't claiming that this is a different deer that was shot.
It's the way the person's perceiving it.
Yeah, but exactly. But he's not saying that it's not. And I think what's really happening in this context is that the two people are treating social media very differently. One person is just going, here's a picture, and promoting their business. Here's a picture, I'm promoting my business. Whereas the other person is a younger hunter, and they're thinking more along the lines of, Instagram specifically is supposed to be like, I take the picture, I post it. It's like a live account of my life.
That's why it's It's instant. That's the whole point.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's never, like, it's not like when you go onto Instagram and you create an account, it says, whoa, hold up, just so you know, like, everything has to be instant, like, especially as Instagram has changed, like, so many reels and stuff are kind of manufactured and fabricated on a PC and then uploaded. So, I mean, do you think that person was within their right to be frustrated and to call out the actions of this guy, to say, hey, that's not okay?
Did they call them out other than just to you?
I think that they went as far as to call them out on social media. I'm not 100% sure if that happened. I don't want to overstep and say the wrong thing, but I think so.
Look, no, I don't know. I can't really comment. I'm not that person, and I don't know their reasons for doing it. And I quite often find if you put those two people in a room and they had the opportunity to talk to each other about it, they'd both walk away going, we probably could do things a little differently. Yeah. They might both take that on. Like I said, I'm personally not one to particularly call people out. I'd rather message them and just find out some more detail about it and then make my own decision. So I get where the guide's coming from, and that comes back to my comment on pressure for content. And we all know that when a deer drops, you take 150,000 photos. Yeah. Now, you can use that. They're your photos. You can use them whenever you want. It's not a whole lot different to putting a picture up of your kid that you took 3 weeks ago and it wasn't today. It's, no one's commenting and saying, that wasn't today. So, I don't know. I think that's a little bit judgmental on that hunter's point. And especially, it's a hunter on a business page. Like, it's his business. He needs to create content and be engaging, and that's what he's showing. This was a successful hunt. It's not just a one photo hunt.
Well, so. let me speak. I know that you're a real tech guy, Dodge. That you love tech, and you're always looking for the new tech. So let me give you a bit of a heads up and some emerging tech that you might want to get into, because I know you're salivating thinking about it. And it directly relates to what we're talking about. I'm not just having a go. Basically, over the last, I'm going to say 6 months, there's been a fairly rapid development in artificial intelligence image generation, in that there's these codes, these software based that they've been trained on all these different images, all these different libraries. We're talking like squillions of images, and you type in a text prompt like hunter standing over red stag that's been shot, and you hit enter, and it creates the image based on your prompt. And it's not stitching together images that it's seen. It's creating something new and real. And they're insanely good. They're insanely clever. And
Have you seen them? Have you got an example?
I've used them. I've tested them to see. And there's
Is that where your photos come from?
Yes, all of the deer that I've shot are just artificially created. No. But I bring it up because it takes this whole truth, authenticity thing to such a completely next level, in that you will be able to create images of deer and superimpose yourself in them. Anyone, the layman, you don't have to have any technical skills at all, will be able to create these pictures and post them for free. And I just wonder whether a tool like that will do more damage than good, because there's so many great creative applications for something like that. You can literally type in whatever you want, fuzzy kitten riding a rocket over a Twisties packet or something, and it will make it. And you can go, you can get a picture and you get to choose between 8 or 9 different pictures, and then you can click on one and refine it and make it even more specific, or just kind of keep iterating on that picture until you find the one that you want. You can even put your own face into it and it will superimpose you over the Twisties packet or whatever you want. But I just wonder whether that will create, for new hunters especially, or for hunting content creators, to abuse that and essentially start posting things that aren't real. And
I hope not. But
do you think people will?
No, I don't. But I don't doubt there will be some people try it. Can you tell?
What if I told you I posted one already to test and see if people could see it?
To be fair, I haven't scrolled through your socials, so I can't say if I've seen it or not.
Here's a test. In anticipation of this conversation, I posted a picture that is not real on Instagram within the last 2 weeks.
Can I look at it now while we're live on air?
Sure.
Okay. What's your Instagram handle for the listeners?
The Australian Huntsman, maybe? I don't even know. I'm going to look it up now.
Sorry, listeners, while we go through this. Australian. Yeah, it's one word, the Australian Huntsman.
One word, the Australian Huntsman. There is a picture within the last...
The muddy boot?
Yeah. So if you jump on Instagram right now, if you're watching this podcast or you're listening to this podcast and you go to the Australian Huntsman, here we go. This is not promotion that I thought would happen.
No. Listen, I led this path, not you.
But there is a picture of a muddy boot in a forest, and the byline, the title is, "Looks like someone is missing a boot, ? Ha ha ha." And it is completely fake.
So for the listeners out there, I have just commented on it from the Endless Pursuit podcast, saying #fake.
Well, see, and no one batted an eyelid. In fact, it's got 8 likes. I don't have a crazy social media following, but to me, that looks pretty realistic.
I thought it might have been the photo before it of Hunter in check jacket drinking from silver coffee cup over lake.
Yeah, no, it's not that one. But I think the prompt was something like boot stuck in the mud in a forest with a shallow
It's very
focus.
clever, and you can't tell.
No, it's completely fake. It's completely fake. It's not even like stitched together. So yeah, I wonder whether that's going to and it actually has an Instagram filter over it that makes it look faker than what it is actually, with the kind of vignette. But there you go.
Yeah, right. No, I don't. I hope that doesn't impact the industry.
Oh, I hope it doesn't. I mean, if it got to the point where, I think once it gets to video, then it'll be incredibly dangerous. Then people will be like living in the Matrix and not sure what's real and fake anymore. But we're a ways off that yet. But I definitely think. I mean, it'll affect some industries more than others.
Definitely.
But it was actually funny. When I was doing my tests just to see what would happen. It just the AI doesn't really understand deer. Like it gets deer a little bit, but it doesn't fully understand it. And so you'll see like a red deer with like 62 tines or like crazy antlers.
If you've ever hunted in New Zealand,
Yeah,
it's actually
exactly.
not uncommon.
It was just funny. They look really wacky. They don't know how to treat antlers just quite yet. But anyway, all right. Another question for you.
Go.
Along this line of truth. Apart from the fox backstraps, have you ever lied about a hunting story?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you give me an example?
Not particularly, because I'd be lying if I said I remembered.
Has there been one that stuck out that where you've been like, oh no, I didn't do that, like, and felt bad? Or have they just been, like you said before, little kind of exaggerations?
Yeah, no, I don't. There? So I would clarify in saying that I don't think I've changed, to my knowledge, any of the major details. So, where I was, who I was with, the size of the animal, and things like that. I mean, I probably shorten stories or lengthen stories depending on what was needed to fill the space, whether, on Facebook you got to shorten things, or in real life conversation you want to lengthen the story to cause some drama and whatnot. And so definitely I have done it. I'm not going to lie in saying that. I don't recall any moments where I thought, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that because that's going to come back to hurt me. I would put them in the white lie, building drama story, not embellishing the major facts of the story.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me ask you another question though. So for those watching or listening, they may not know that you're a hunting guide. It's one of the things that you do, and quite a good one from what I've heard from different sources. So pat on the back for you for that.
Thank you.
I've always wondered, and I've asked a few different guys this and had a few different answers. When you take out someone in a professional capacity, do you know exactly where the game animal that you're hunting is? And there is a little bit of kind of like, let's go over here and check out this spot. Let's check out that spot. And really you're like, no, I know exactly where they are. But you've got to give people value for money.
Yes and no. And it depends on the situation, a bit of theatrical stuff. And I make that call. I'm a very good reader of people, I believe. It hasn't, it's served me well in the past. I make a quick judgment based on initial meeting of people and a quick assessment of their gear and things, of to their level of expertise and skills and whatnot. I actually do, I teach a hunting course, and it's called, what's it called? Accurate Hunts from the beginning. So we teach a beginner's hunting course. And this one particular course I took, I'll tell two stories, this one and then some guiding stuff. And I took 6 clients, and 3 at a time, into a property that had 300 goats in 300 acres. Right, so it was a slam dunk kind of fish in a barrel situation on purpose, and that's why I took them to that property. Now, I know that I went past the property the night before, and I knew that all the goats were on one particular side of the hill. So I walked up and down, stalking goats that weren't there on the side of the hill where they weren't. Because I could have just walked them straight up and shot one, but that's not... I'm trying to teach them a realistic hunting scenario inside a barrel. So I tried to give them... I had 3 hours to get it done because we had to get back to the classroom to finish the the theory side of the course. So I knew my time bracket and I knew what I had to get done. I knew where the animals were, but we went up and down and made them work for it a little bit.
Did they know that?
Absolutely not. They probably do now if they're listening. But they came away from it learning, what tracks to look for, what a bed looks like. If I just went up and shot one, they wouldn't have learnt these key thing. And so that was a teaching experience. From a guiding point of view, the only place that particularly happens is in New Zealand, when we're not focused on free range things. We're on the estate style hunting, and we know the animals are in there, and we can gauge quickly, is the hunter looking for an experience or just to get it done so they can get back down and start drinking wine again. And we can manufacture is probably not the right word, but elaborate on the work initially and head up the tracks where we know the deer will see us coming a long way away and run away. So it makes it a little more, they have to work for a little bit. And you've mentioned it before, both on our podcast and your previous one about losing blood to make it worthwhile. Like, you have to leave a bit of yourself on the mountain every time you do something to really get enjoyment out of it. And I know we're manufacturing that a little bit, but that's the sort of details these clients remember. And we can, but that's the only time that happens. So all the other properties I hunt are completely free range, and sometimes we work our butts off for a week and can't find jack. So, or, nothing that's a shooter, or that there's, so 99% of the situation, I would say that we're definitely not manufacturing the fact that we can't find anything. We would love to find things, or, find something in range, or find something in the bracket that the client's looking for. So I understand the question, and it definitely happens.
Yeah, well, I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to guiding, is how unique each of these experiences are and how tailored they are to the person. And most of the guides that I've met are like yourself. They're really good at reading people, and they find it difficult and frustrating to pull together something that can be put online, some sort of package, because everything is so tailored to the person, to their experience, to what they want to get out of it. And so, and this is coming from someone who literally runs a website where I force them to do just that. I'm like, you need to make this like a one pager. Like, we need to categorize this and spit it out, and so people can understand, because it like you say, there is just so many different dynamics at play that influence how a hunt can go, or how it should go, based on what the person wants. And you can, like you said, you can go out there and you can risk, you can do a state forest hunt or a large free range hunt where you've got a very minute chance of getting anything, but in some ways you have to package that into a product and sell it and market it, and that can be very difficult. Or you could just do like a ranch hunt where you know exactly where that red stag is, and you're just going to send people to him eventually.
So, two-part. One, I want to touch on your and my first interaction some time ago, which I don't actually think you remember. And the second part...
I want to hear what it is. I think I do.
And the second part... Now I can't remember it. What was it? You were just talking about it.
Sorry.
No, well, the second part is, if you were to package some of the hunts together, you would say something like, epic hunts, you're going to bleed $5,000. Like, some of it, it's just very hard to encapsulate. So our first, what's the word? Engagement or meeting. You actually sent an email to Accurate Hunts when you set up your website.
Yes, I did.
And I rang you based on that, or asked you to ring me or something. I'm not sure of those details.
You said it wouldn't be appropriate.
So we spoke on the phone, and I didn't particularly like what you'd set up, because this is a truthful conversation.
I know, this is what I want to do. This is what's under the rocks.
Awkward. And I said this to Matt when we were going to get you on our podcast. I said, I don't know if I like the guy, so I'll take one for the team and talk to him for 2 hours. I know exactly
what you're going to say as well. I know exactly what you're going to say. Why you don't like it.
Let me say it.
And it's valid. It's valid.
So my point was, so I'm not only a hunting guide, I'm a booking agent. So I love organising detail. So my clients come to me because they don't just want to book a hunt in Townsville and then that's the end of it. I organise the car that comes and pick them up, what time their flights are based around them and their family's movements and things, what flight they want to go on, what seat they like, their preference in seat, do they want extra leg room. I know how they like their steaks cooked. I know, what type of accommodation they want. Are they looking for a one-bedroom, penthouse, or are they looking for the cheapest thing they want? Are they looking for a private chauffeur to pick them up at the other end, or are they happy with a bus? If they ring me and say I want to shoot a red stag, I know exactly where to send them based on their needs. And that's when someone goes on, like, I'm going to liken your website to Flight Centre. So if you go on Flight Centre, no one scrolls down to the last page where Qantas is charging $44,000 to fly to Brisbane because you've got to go through 800 countries and you're getting first class the whole way. And my hunts are definitely not cheap, but my clients know that what they get for that is what they want out of it themselves. It's like super tailored to the point where everyone knows their name the whole way along the trip. Like the hotel knows their name and things, welcome to the hotel, Mr. Kier, I'll take your rifle off you. Looking forward to a good hunt. These are all details I've CC'd them in on, and they know all this stuff. So it's come from years of experience, and I know what they want. But so I said that to you on the phone. I said, I don't think my business is suited to your page for those reasons. And we sort of left it at that. And then you came on board, and then now I'm a member of your damn stupid hunting club. So I came away from that with a completely different picture of yourself. And I've had a text.
You said, nearly won as well. You nearly won the hunt that came out today.
You were like, nearly?
Well, there's a little. I punch all the names into this little name picker that's like a spinny.
Out of interest.
Who won? It was Owen R. It won, I believe. Hogger L won the hunting products, and it spun around, and it stopped just. It was almost going to land on your name, and then it landed on Owen's, and I'm kind of glad that it did, because I was like, oh, if it had landed on Dodge, and then I do a podcast with Dodge, rigged. That would have looked real bad.
But in fairness, I joined. In honesty and openness, I paid full price. There was a discussion. You did say, I'd give you a free at some point. And I said, no, it's fine. We support those that support us, and we had a guest on last night, and he'll be on soon. But he does cooking books, and we while we were talking to him, bought them online off his page.
Wow.
And it's just, you support us, we support you, and we'll jump on that. And I came away from that conversation, and I'm not the only one. There's people that have listened to it that have said to me, wow, like, we appreciate your ability to articulate a conversation, and what you see as the future of hunting was encouraging. And we agree with that. So
well, thank you.
I know that's not where this question went, but I
understand where you're coming from as well, in that, and this is something that I've spoken to all the guides about on the website, is that the last thing that I want to do with Hunting Trips Australia is cheapen the hunting experience and create a market that forces everyone to lower prices, because I'm a huge fan of what a guided hunt can do for an individual, especially for a new hunter. I think there is such an opportunity to learn, and I'm seeing more and more. I'm seeing a shift in the market, even in the last kind of 2 years, where there's more and more, I'm going to say, educational-based hunts as opposed to trophy hunts.
Well, you just had one jump on the other day, the Wild Food Master, Alex.
Exactly. Alex is a legend, and he's getting up. I think he mentioned that you know him, actually. He even said, here we go. He's a bit of a pat on the back. He was talking about how you were spruiking me, and doing that behind my back. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so there's this trend towards the educational ones, and I love it. And so what I want to do with Hunting Trips Australia is make it accessible and easy to understand and easy to find. And the danger is the platform, and I'm very, very conscious of it, is that I don't want people fighting over awareness or attention and trying to play the system, because I want people, it sounds funny, but it sounds like a terrible thing for a platform owner to say, but I want the people on the platform to be as expensive as they can be, that's justified and reasonable, because I think it's such an awesome service. My goal is to actually get it in front of more and more people, but I do understand that for people like yourself that offer a really tailored experience, a really high-end experience, it's not an ideal platform because when you give people volume and choice and the ability to quickly filter between things, unfortunately, sometimes they choose the ones that are the cheapest.
Or middle range. I find that, like, I'm a tradie outside of hunting, and I'm in the I'm above middle range, and we find that all the time. Oh, we didn't go with your quote, we went with someone cheaper. Not the cheapest, just cheaper, and that's fine. I understand that, as long as it's apples for apples, which
exactly. I mean, we've gone and had our driveway re-asphalted, and we got a whole bunch of quotes. And the guy that we went with was the guy who said, "Hey, I'm the most expensive, but I'm also the best. And if you go with me, you won't be redoing your driveway for like 15 years." And then I was like, I work in marketing. Like, that's a good thing to say. But then I tested a whole bunch of his referrals that he didn't give me that I just found online, and it was legitimate. And so I went with him because I'm like, I want this to last and I want to pay. And guided hunting is exactly the same as that. There are really good guides and that are expensive or higher than most, and then there's guides that aren't as good that are really, really cheap, and or not necessarily not as good, but offer less of a service, let's say, or a restricted service.
There's definitely the devil's in the detail. Are you, in a tented camp and you're expected to wash up and sort of cook your own meals, or is everything getting handed to your served hand and foot, and there's a cook in camp? There's lots of details. When it says food supplied, that's all it says. It doesn't say any more detail on that. So it's
well, here's a question for you, Dodge. Let's continue along that thread, because this is something that's unique to you and to this whole discussion around the truth and also Hunting Trips Australia, is that I find it really difficult to draw out information from guides, especially guides that have been doing it a long time. And I'll literally say that there's like one dot point that says meals and drinks provided. And I'm saying, hey, come on, let's flesh that out. Let's get more information. Like, let's sell it. Tell people what you're giving them. But they're just not interested because they've been doing it for a long time and blah, 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 blah. Or they just don't have the time and the effort, the energy. But there is like value in that. And so you can look at two different guides that say exactly the same thing and have two very different experiences. And because you're dealing with people's attention, you've got such a small amount of time to convey the really important things for them to realize how good you are. So with all that said, how do you kind of play in that space? How do you convince people, not convince people, how do you inform people about the value of your offering? Or is it just you've been doing it long enough that people know you by reputation and know that you offer a really good service and come to you?
I'll just clarify that as back on the before I go on to that one, the previous conversation is it's also very hard to go on your website as I do a lot more booking agency than I do guiding. So I'm only taking a percentage of the situation. So for me to, put a hunt on there at a whatever price, I'm middlemaning a lot of them. So it's hard to, you're saying about the prize that you gave away today. If I give away a hunt, I'm losing $4,000 or $5,000 because it's not mine to give away. I can only give away my percentage. As for your other question, I generally sell my hunts either face-to-face, word of mouth, or through the show system, whether it be SHOT Show or Deer Expo or whatnot. And I had the most successful show I had was Deer Expo pre-COVID-19, I think it was. And my conversion rate, I sold more hunts that show than I had ever sold at any show. I was like pretty much every conversation I had converted into a deposit on the day. And that's because the places, even though I am a booking agent, the places I'm booking them are places that I've been. I've sat on their toilet. I've laid in their beds. I've shot their guns. I've eaten their food. I've walked their tracks. I've been in their cars. I understand the detail. So
I feel like I'm like at the show and you're speaking to me and you're like, I've sat on their toilet.
Yeah, well,
I'm sold. Let's sign me up.
One of the toilets is pre-warmed. There's details that you just can't put in dot points, and some of them you probably shouldn't. So I'm a visual person, and I can paint that picture for you if you and I are having a discussion. So I don't need to. I've got a full-time job. The hunting's my passion. It's not my income. I definitely do it as a sideline not sideline. It's definitely not sideline in my brain. It's forefront. But it's I have a successful fencing business. I've got a good crew of guys, and we're booked out for a year or so. I don't need to really promote that. So the hunting is my getaway and what I enjoy doing. So it's, to talk to me about booking a trip is something I'm super passionate about because I've been there. I've hunted it. I've guided it. I've usually been on the blocks, all the blocks. So to flesh out a few dot points is very difficult. If I could do each dot point as an audio answer, throw that on your website and, it might be much easier for me because I can articulate to you much better verbally than I can in the written form, which is, Matt always makes fun of me. And for those, Matt's the co-host on the podcast, but he's always making fun of me that I can read, but I don't. I'm much better at verbalizing things than writing them down.
Is that why you've been sending me voicemails as opposed to text messages, or is that just because you haven't been able to get on to me?
Look, both.
Do you intentionally hang up and then leave a voicemail?
I love leaving voicemails, and I've got a few mates that absolutely hate it, and my wife hates them too. And even on Messenger, I'll send a voice message. But one day, I'm going to die, Chris, and not like your wife who hasn't died, you mentioned earlier, but
correct.
I'm actually going to die, and you're going to listen to that voicemail and you go, I miss Dodge's voice. Like, you're just going to have this thing forever in your voicemail from me. So you'll thank me one day.
I will literally be like at the day of your funeral. I'm like, where's that phone that I had? I had this sweet message from Dodge, and I won't be able to find it. I'll just be in tears, rummaging through my cupboards looking for this phone.
I expect nothing less. But also, like, you'll be able to put together a montage of my voice messages, and play them over my casket.
We'll have some AI that's just like concatenates and combines all of your voicemails into this lovely message.
Actual conversation.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be able to speak to you beyond the grave, and
I'll be like Tupac. I'll come back on my coffin in AI.
That's great because your podcast will just keep going.
Well, it probably should without me sometimes, I think. But no,
it truly will be. It will be the endless podcast, the endless pursuit in all senses.
Coming at you not live from the grave.
Yeah.
So,
let's talk about the grave. Let's talk about faith and
good segue.
And I know. I thought so. I haven't been waiting, but I thought, you know what? It's time. It's time to talk about faith because, as you mentioned, you're a man of faith. I'm a man of faith, and we can talk about what that means in a second. But my question to you, at least initially through that lens, and kind of continuing on this idea of truth, is how does your faith interact with your experience or your love of hunting or your hunting world? How do the two interact? Do they synergize? Are they connected intimately? Are they in conflict? Tell me more about it.
Definitely a synergy together. And I remember the first time I met my in-laws. So my wife grew up quite religious, and I grew up Catholic, so not religious. I was Catholic by birth, not by choice. And I've since, been baptized and changed. But I remember I walked into their home the first time, and I had just come back from an overseas 6-month hunting trip. I'd literally been with my partner for 7 months and been overseas for 6 months of that. So
that's so good.
She picked me up
and then you met the in-laws. Wow.
Well, yeah, picked me up from the airport, and I think it was, and then I headed back out to her place, and I was meeting the parents I drove out to her house, and then...
Did you recognize her at the airport? You're like, who are you?
She came to the airport dressed in a ball gown once because I was late for a wedding, but that's another story.
I thought she was going to be dressed as a deer or something.
No, she's an introvert, not an extrovert. She would never draw attention to herself. I turned up at her parents' place to pick her up to go out. That's what it was. And I walked in, and I'd not long been home from overseas, and her father said, Nimrod has returned from his hunt. And I thought, what are you talking about? I had no idea what that reference meant. And it's something that I had to go home, and I asked her about. I was like, what did he call me? I thought he called me like a dimwit or something. Like, what's a Nimrod? And for those that don't know, look it up in the Bible. But it's...
Look it up in the Bible. It's not even like look it up in the dictionary. It's like, I don't care if you're a Christian or not. Look it up in the Bible. Go find the Bible.
Or look Google, like most people probably will. And yeah, it's it's something that prior to, it was probably on that trip, so prior to being baptized, I remember being on top of a mountain in Montana, and I was with a client, and they had bought their wife's ashes with them. So there was a father and daughter that were hunting, and they had bought the wife and mother's ashes with them to sprinkle, like she was supposed to come on the trip too. So this has happened twice. I'll get to the other one a bit later, but he was, we were on this mountain, and he, told me what he was going to do, and it didn't really matter to me. But then when it sort of was
Did you charge him an observer's rate?
It was definitely not. It's I can't put this in a dot point, offer ashes spreading services.
Plus.
And it became really emotional for myself, which I didn't really expect. And it was a weird thing. As soon as he started spreading the ashes, the clouds dropped from above. And when I say dropped, I mean the ceiling came down. It was like we could reach the condense, we could reach the clouds, and you could like swish them away. The fog was just sitting just above our head. And I put a post up, this was years ago, and it's on my socials somewhere, and it says something like, I'm not a religious person, but today I reached the ceiling and I could touch heaven, or something like that. And it felt like something had come down and like made, I don't know, just affected me more than I have ever expected it to. And I'm not saying that spurred something on, but it's definitely a memory that really sat with me. And again, that was before I got baptized and whatnot. So I wasn't a religious person at that point. I wouldn't, even now, consider myself a struggling religious person, just always doing the wrong thing and trying. That's how we always fail. But
that sounds like an honest religious person.
Yeah, well, true. But
more than a struggling one.
So they're definitely intertwined. And all the people in our church, or we call it a meeting more so than church, but all the people at the meeting know what I do. They're very interested in it and intrigued. And it's definitely something I can draw on with clients. There's a lot of clients, especially internationally, that are religious and whatnot. And we have some really great conversations when you're 2 days deep on a horseback ride and your butt's hurting and it's raining and snowing. You start to draw on your faith, and it really fuels a lot of conversation. Something that's come from our podcast and not something I ever expected is I've spoken about it a few times, faith, and not in this sort of depth, but just mention it. And I've had guys reach out to me and say, hey, heard you talking on the podcast, and it's cool to see another man of faith talking about that or something. And I've struck up two in particular. I've struck up a conversation with and a bond with that. It's not something I ever thought. I even suggested to one of them we should start a Christians in Camo hunting group, because it would be a good way to get away on a Sunday. But
I'm going to church, honey.
Yeah, well,
bang.
But, it's your sort. Depends what your sort of church is. Now, I also
100%.
I also did an exhort, which for those that might not know, but it's basically our church. We don't have a pastor or a leader or anything, and we take it in turns. To someone sits up the front and organises things for the day on the Sunday, and then someone else comes up, whether it be someone from that ecclesia or someone from a visiting ecclesia, comes up and does a talk, and it's called an
ecclesia.
Ecclesia
means church for those people who don't have a Bible.
Yes, correct. So
it literally means the gathering or the community, the church.
Or if you'd like to pronounce it in a different way, there's some people, ecclesia, which is quite an interesting pronunciation.
Ecclesia is the actual word.
Ecclesia. So I was, we'd taken in turns as a roster, and I was up to do an exhort or an exhortation. And we get to set our own topic. And I really struggle when someone says, oh, you should do it on this. So I thought, what can I do it on that relates to me? And I did it on guiding. And because it's just a topic that I know so well, whereas the Bible, I didn't know so well. So I used that as a leap, as a starting point. And I used that to study. And I did an illustration on the whiteboard while I was doing the exhort. And it was me being a guide versus, Jesus or God being our guide, right? And referencing the people that follow. And I liken it to sort of three different types of clients. There's clients that they always want to walk beside you. They always want to just be beside you, slightly behind you, but also looking in front. They don't trust where you're leading them.
Yeah.
Then you've got clients that follow behind you. They might deviate left and right, and they pick their own path, but still in the same direction that I'm going. And then there's clients that if you look behind you and you're in the snow, there's one set of footprints. They follow you blindly. One step in mine, then the next step in my other step. And that I likened that, I mean, it was a 45-minute conversation or turned into a 3-minute, 1-minute explanation right now. But I liken that into the way that we follow Christ. And are you the person that just follows him blindly and says that I completely trust in you, you're going to lead my path? Or are you the person that always like, oh yeah, I trust, oh, hold on, let me just have a look in the front there. What's around beside there? Can I go on to do that for a second? Or are you following your own path and sort of deviating back towards Christ a little bit and then heading off your own path and coming back? And they came up to me at the end of it. And that particular meeting I was at, I'm the youngest person by about 1,202 years. So it's quite an older congregation. And they really got the message.
Yeah.
And the illustration helped, obviously. I'm a really good drawer, that's a lie. I'm a terrible drawer. So, but it really helped them visualize what I meant. And it definitely, I'm not going to say one has strengthened the other. I don't think faith has strengthened my hunting ability or my hunting ability has strengthened my faith, but I can draw a line straight between them and say these things are connected.
It's interesting that you talk about how you liken it to your guiding experience, because at least the experiences that I've had paying for guided hunts and then just hanging out with guides and hunting with guides who are friends, when you trust the guide and you give the guide complete freedom and you say like, hey, you're the expert in this area, you know it, you do this day in, day out, whatever you say, I will do, you always get the best results. But you have to relinquish your control and your sense of kind of wanting to hold it tightly and master it and own it. And that's I feel like that's getting harder and harder for people to relinquish control over things. Everyone wants to be master of their own universe. Everyone wants to be their own God. This is the greatest issue that we have in today's society. I think that if you asked me what is the thing that is killing humanity, I would say it's idolatry, in the sense that we all want to be God. We all want to have complete control over our lives. And the reality is that we're all imperfect. And so when we take control, this is the difference between, like what I was saying before, the abstract, absolute values versus the gray. When we take control of our own lives, we mess it up. We make poor decisions and we don't get great outcomes. And the same is true with hunting, is when you trust the guide and you say, hey, I'm literally going to step in your footprint so I don't step on a stick and crack it and then lose the deer, or I will wait till you tell me to load around in the chamber, or I will point the gun where you tell me to point it, or any number of different things, then there's kind of this beauty and freedom in that. And that's not to say that you can't ask questions of the guide. That's not to say that you can't sometimes challenge the guide in a sense of relationship. Like to say, for instance, when I was out hunting in the northeast of Victoria with Gordon from Northeast Experience, and we were contoring along this ridgeline, and he suggested that we head further north up the top. And the wind was in our face. And I said, well, and he wanted to go up and then circle back around. And I said, well, he said that. And then I said immediately, well, if we do that, won't we scent out that area that we've just kind of walked through and, ruin our chance of losing, of getting the game? And he was like, no. And then he explained why. But he wasn't, afraid. He wasn't chastising me for asking, and I wasn't disrespectful, and whatever he said I was going to do. And I just think, I think that's interesting. I mean, the other experience that I have with the interaction between faith and hunting is that I don't know whether this is just me. I think this is my experience. Maybe you can speak more to this, whether this happens for you as well. But hunters, we tend to be somewhat philosophical, whether we voice it or not, whether we can articulate it or not. We tend to think a lot and deeply when you're out there in the bush and you're 3 days deep in a snowstorm on the back of a horse. You can't help but fall into your own mind and question decisions that you're making in life, or reflect on the relationships that you have, or question, why am I here doing this thing? And or when you take an animal's life and you're looking at an animal bleed out in front of you, you think about things like life and death. You think about the value of an animal. You think about whether or not you've respected that animal. So I find that hunters, whether they can articulate it or not, tend to be philosophical in nature, and almost they have almost this religious experience of, and a faith-based experience of hunting, whether they have a specific religion or denomination or faith or not. They tend to still have some experience of it. Is that something that you've found?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's faith-based, even just morals. But just being alone in that time out in the field forces you to think about those things, and there's just such a bigger picture. And just the alone time really just concretes that in your mind that, we are only part of this wheel. We're only one of the cogs on the gear. And I sometimes think to myself, I don't know how people aren't religious, because there's just so many things out there that are like, there's no way that just happened.
Yeah.
Like without some sort of design. And I know I've listened to the arguments on both sides and things, and I understand why some people aren't religious. I understand, but I also think they're not asking the right questions, or maybe not being told the right answers. I definitely, when I first came across to this faith, I fully went into it trying to convince these people that they were all wrong.
Yeah.
And I left there a year later. It took them that long to convince me that they were possibly right. A year later, I'm like, you're right. There's some deeper stuff out there, and from a hunting point of view, I think the time alone strengthens your mind. It definitely weakens some people's. They can't handle it, but I think it strengthens mine, and it's something I really enjoy doing, and being alone and traveling. So
yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question fully.
No, it does. I mean, I was out hiking the last 2 days, and it's the first time I've gone on a backpack hike. Before I went and did it with my wife, who's Amy, who's really into hiking, and we were hiking.
She passed away.
Yeah, exactly. I pushed her off the cliff. We were hiking along it's called the Great Ocean Walk, and it's along the Great Ocean Road, and it's this. There's different segments of it, and we were doing about 10K a day with about a 15 kilo pack, and that's the truth. That's not embellishing. There's no plus or minus. They are the stats. In fact, I think it was 10.6 kilometers, but it was my first experience hiking, and we did the first section of it together, and then she moved on to the next section for the second day, and I actually went back along the same track we'd just gone the second day to get to the car, and then drive the car to meet her, basically, so that we could not have to get chauffeured around and stuff. But it was interesting that we were talking obviously the whole way. I think it was about a 4-hour walk, and we were talking the whole first day, and on the way back I was just by myself, and I love my own company. I'm naturally an introvert, which surprises some people because I can talk, and I seem to be engaging and interesting when I talk. But if you ask me, Chris, do you want to stay home and read a book, or do you want to go out to a party? I'll choose the book every time. And so that's one of the reasons why I love hunting. And I had the same experience walking back on the hike. Like, I just had plenty of alone time, plenty of time in my own head. And I was walking along these cliffs, and I was just looking at the surf, the waves, these massive waves just smash up against the rocks, and the sound was just intense. And I just looked at this kind of natural display of energy and momentum and physics and fluid dynamics and biology and chemistry and all these different things happening in this crazy complex system. And I just looked at it and was just overcome with that thought of there's no way that can just be something that's just science. Like, I'm a massive advocate of science. I'm a full believer in science, but I believe science was birthed from a creator. And I think when you the more you look into these systems, the more you look into biology and chemistry, and you see the intricacies, even evolution and science. You see the way that science has developed, and an understanding of physics. I don't think you can. Well, I think if you looked at those things seriously, it's very, very hard not to see a creator, whether it's some sort of crazy alien that we don't understand that made everything, or whether you attribute that to a god, or whether you attribute that to a pantheon of gods. I don't really care what you choose to do, but I think that's where it lends itself. I think that's where it takes you, that thought, that experience.
I think that silence is very loud. I can distinctly recall, again, back to Montana, there was a particular horse ride we did that took 7 hours, and I did it by myself several times, in and out with a string of horses behind me, 6 or 8 or 10 horses. And that's a long time for nothingness. And your mind goes through phases. So initially you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is cool. Oh, yep. I can hear the birds and I can hear the bees and whatnot. Oh, yes. And then your mind goes quiet for a little while. But then your mind gets really loud. Like, it just starts, the ideas start raging. The thought gets louder. It's interesting that, and it can be good or bad. Like, I've had bad instances where the thoughts weren't great, and anyway, I'm not saying I was ever going to do anything stupid, but just the thoughts, you're like, well, that's not a positive thought. I was, thinking about worst case scenarios, or, I'm in the middle of nowhere with, when I say I had horses behind me, they were all carrying half an elk each because I was packing out of the backcountry, taking the meat back to the house. So, like, I'm in a backcountry camp with bear. Literally, they were hunting bear and whatnot. So, it's
you were a big bear bait.
I still am. So I'm probably a bigger bear bait now than I was then. But your mind just starts to play tricks on you, and it takes a strong person to be happy in silence.
Yeah.
And I implore people to, it's a weird complex because when I'm driving, I ring everyone. If I ring you for some reason, I've rung you the other week and I was like, well, I'm driving.
I noticed that.
Chris, I'm like, this conversation's probably pointless, but we'll get there. And I just pass the time because when I'm driving, I don't know, I always talk to people, but when I'm hunting, I love it. I just love the silence and the quietness. Camping alone at night is difficult, definitely difficult. And sharing camp is great. Hunting by yourself is better.
I think you're 100% correct in that it goes one of two ways. Being in a silent place, if you have a positive and healthy mental state, or let's say mental/spiritual, if we're having a spiritual conversation, then you tend to think of positive things. You tend to have positive. You fall into thankfulness and gratefulness. You tend to be going, oh yeah, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so thankful. I love my family, and man, don't I have a good job or whatnot. When you have a negative state of being, whether that's intellectually, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, even physically, you can fall into those negative patterns and these skeletons or demons, not demons in the spiritual sense, demons in the terms of like negative experiences or hidden truths or whatever. Mm-hmm. They can come out to haunt you, and it can becomes a very dangerous place because you don't have the distractions that you can call on to silence it or to numb yourself. You don't, or you do have those things, and it was like alcohol, for instance. To overindulge in alcohol when you're out on a hunt would be incredibly dangerous. But I tend to find myself, I'm a huge advocate for positive mental health and for positive affirmation and for speaking positively to yourself and encouraging yourself. And so I find that when I'm out hunting, it's generally very, very positive and falls into gratefulness. But I'd be interested to talk to someone who has the opposite experience, because that would be so hard, is if you know you're inclined to fall into that trap, then you would be robbing yourself or preventing yourself from having those experiences.
Or saving yourself from them.
Well, yeah.
Not everyone's happy with their own company, and that's I don't.
Should we
I
all
think
be?
that's fine. Well, I think that's fine that not everyone is. I mean, we're all different people. There's people out there in the world that are just yes people, and that's fine. You need those. I mean, I employ them at work because I just want them to say yes and do their job. I don't particularly employ them to be massive thinkers, and I just want them to think about the job at hand and not think about everything else. And so I think that's important that there is people out there like that. So, and if they recognise that maybe an alone time is not great for them, that they need to be around people, why would you force them into a fearful situation where they are by themselves? I think it was when we were talking to you, I admitted that I'm fearful of the dark.
Yeah.
Was that when we were talking on the podcast?
Yeah, it was.
So, just for your listeners, I mean, you can go and listen to our podcast, but listen to it here.
I love it how during this podcast you've like slammed hunting trips. You're like slamming the podcast and like promoting your own. It's just like, it's great.
Says the guy who on ours you like shouted out, well, episode 250 on this podcast, I talk about this.
Hey, I asked if it was okay to do that.
Yeah, well, I took an assumption that it's okay. But anyway, so the story was that I am dead scared of the dark at home. Like, if I need to take the bins out, that scares the crap out of me. I've got to do it tonight because it's bin night here, and I'll probably do it in the morning at 6 o'clock, and that's much better for my
You'll do the run out in the jocks.
That's right. And, when you hear him coming down the road. But put me in the middle of nowhere in pitch black and, like, I am as calm as can be. That's my comfortable place.
Yeah.
And it's just a peace of mind that I get out there. And I think people are the scary part, that's why I'm more at peace in the bush than I am in town or city. And I just, as much as I enjoy talking, being around people, doing the trade shows is amazing. I just run out of voice by Saturday night, and Sunday I'm struggling to talk to clients because I'm just so passionate about, sharing that experience and being around people. But put me in a silent horseback ride in the middle of nowhere, and this is the next level of happiness for me. And something I've missed during COVID, and whatnot. And with having a young family, I don't get away as much as I used to. I, would previously spend 6 months of the year overseas or guiding in some capacity. And now I'm, I still get my wife's quite supportive and I still get time away, but it's definitely at a lower percentage of time, definitely a shorter time frame. So,
yeah. Well, let's finish on one more question, and we'll tie it back into faith and truth. I'm curious how you feel about taking the life of an animal. When you shoot an animal, or even before you shoot an animal, or even before you help someone else shoot an animal, what's running through your head? How do you feel? What do you think about animals and death and life and all that value?
Good question.
Is it okay to kill animals?
Definitely.
Is it okay to kill animals for trophy?
Yes.
Is it okay to kill animals just for the sake of killing animals?
I disagree with that one.
Is it okay to kill a cull animal, an animal that's genetically not as fit?
Yes.
How many?
No, you keep going.
How many cull animals is it okay to kill in one day?
As many as you need to get to your goal.
Let's say my goal is 1,000. Is that okay?
Well, no, sorry, I meant what's the goal of culling them? Because if you're on Water Valley and there's too many animals and it's unfair on them that there's too many animals because there's not enough feed to support them, then you keep culling until you get to the level where that land is sustainable. And I think, I can't remember where it is, but I'm going to reference Bible stuff. We have dominion over the land and the sea and the animals, and it's our responsibility to be stewards of that. And I think we are responsible for the reason there's too many animals. So we need to take a responsible look at ourselves and say, what do we do about that? We need to take some out. And I don't know what the appropriate level is, and I don't know that I'll ever understand that. What's his name? Chris Kyle, I think, the sniper guy, American sniper. He's got like the best kill rate or whatever. And a reporter famously asked him, "What do you feel when you take someone's life?" And he said, "Recoil." And so to him, it was a job. Yeah. He had removed that emotion from it, and probably he hadn't. Maybe he's actually he got shot in a tragic accident, or that's a story in itself. And I can understand his comment that he had removed himself from that because it had become a job. And for me, it's not a job. I do feel thankful for everything that we take, and we definitely do our best to remove and utilize and memorialize. Is that the word?
Yeah.
You can see behind me in the video, I've got there's 4 animals that you can see in the video there, but there's, I think on my other wall, in this room in total, there's like 27 dead animals, and they're just the ones that are in this room. So I try and we eat as much as we can. We use as much as we can. We keep the skins, we mount them, we keep the antlers. The dogs eat what's left. Nothing's wasted in my way of doing things. And I know that's not everyone's. And being honest, in the past, I've definitely shot game and left them. And I clarify that as that's when I was a shooter. I hadn't yet become a hunter.
Yeah.
So, and at that time I wasn't religious. I wouldn't say being religious has changed my respect level for animals. I don't, particularly go up and say a prayer or anything after harvesting an animal, but I'm definitely more appreciative of what it took to get that animal to that point that I was able to harvest it and then use it. So I've been honest in the past and said that I do enjoy killing animals. You spoke about this in your previous podcast, and I'm not afraid to say that I quite enjoy having the power of life or death over that animal. It's a weird feeling, and not one that I vocalize down the street. But I'm happy to talk about it with hunters, because it's a feeling that most hunters might possibly feel but are too scared to talk about. And they want to hide behind the fact that I took this for meat. Well, did you? Or did you just is that a byproduct? Which it is for me. I'm not a meat hunter. I have a lot of meat because I shoot a lot, but I'm looking for trophy animals. That's what I do for a job. That's what I do. That's what I enjoy. And a trophy for some people. No, you can't yet.
Sorry, keep going then. Keep going.
Well, no, you put me off and I can't remember where I was going. But yeah, so go for it.
So
No, I remembered. You can wait. Sorry. And one thing I struggle with, and I've done it a few times, is putting animals down. So people think that hunters and shooters just want to shoot everything, just want to kill everything. I've put down dogs. I've put down horses. I've dug 3 holes this year for horses. 2 that we've put down, and 1 that was a client's that was put down, and I was there for it. I cried through all of them. I bawled my eyes out, and one of them's not even my horse. That's super emotional for me. Like the ending of a life, it can't be taken lightly. And I definitely don't cry in the hunting situation, but people think that hunters don't care for animals, and that gets me. That hurts because we care probably more than most about animals.
I agree.
And I give an example of, there's a particular species of sheep in Australia that's small numbers, but it's a Jacob's 4-horn sheep. And I've been talking to the breeder about securing some, and she said, "What do you want to do with them?" I said, "Well, I'm a hunter and whatnot, and eventually I'd like to kill some." And she goes, "Well, that's interesting. I breed them to live." And I said, "Yeah, I'm talking 10 years down the track after, I would possibly have 20 or 30 or 40 mature males." And she's like, "Oh, that's amazing. Like, you want to secure them for that long?" So she was amazed that I was interested in preserving the herd and growing a herd so that we could harvest some. She sort of had the opinion that I wanted to buy them to shoot them right now, but I'm more interested in, shooting them eventually, but preserving that. So, I think, anyway, I'm not afraid to kill an animal, and I'm not afraid to tell people I enjoy it.
Let's dig into that, because thank you, first of all, for saying that and being honest, because that's not an easy thing to say. And I think that there's incredible value in exploring the truth, and dare I say it, the beauty behind that. You mentioned before, referencing scripture, that the Bible, and it talks about in Genesis in the early chapters about how God it is said in the Bible, whether you believe it or not, that God gave dominion to man over the birds of the air, the beasts of the land, so forth. Do you interpret that as animals exist for us, or like for us, for our consumption, for us to use and to manage, or do they exist because they exist and we have a responsibility to manage them?
I think we have a responsibility to manage them, and I think we've done that poorly. So I think they were put there for dual purpose, for companionship for us, but also sustenance for us.
Yeah.
And I think the environment needs them, so they bounce off each other and
they play a role,
companion relationship with trees and grass and whatnot. So they're definitely needed for the larger picture. And I think as a species, we've done a terrible job of maintaining that. And I think it's our role to be more responsible in that. And if that means culling 1,000 animals because you know that there's a drought coming, or you're in a drought and this land cannot support them, what's the option?
Yeah.
Are we good stewards of our land? I think I really enjoy the term stewardship. It's not sort of the shepherding type thing. It's being responsible for what we're in charge of. And I think as hunters, we've done it really poorly over the years. And I get it a little bit with the whole game pest species and deer and things. And we want to preserve them as a game species so that we can hunt them for longer. But people go out and shoot a lot of trophy animals. The downside of that is you need to shoot a lot of does. You need to shoot a lot of females, because you can't just have an increasing population of females with a decreasing population of males. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of that behind the scenes. We'll go out and cull or take a client out and say, this is not a stag hunt. You're shooting 20 chill
for the freezer. Yeah.
And Water Valley does it. I've seen it down there that, there was one hunt that went up and it was 50 to 100 deer needed to be taken in a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually reached out and said, how much is that? And I did the maths on taking a cool room truck down there because they were literally going to kill them and pile them up.
Dump them, yeah.
So I did the maths on it. Was 10 grand for the hunt, and then I worked that out. And then the value of venison at the moment, and I reached out to a few local suppliers, and they all said we can't take it because it's shot not commercially. So
yeah,
I didn't enter into it, and I'm assuming it's happened either way, whether they sold the hunt or not. So I think we need to be better stewards of the resource we have from a religious point of view, or even just from an ethical human point of view. I think we're terrible stewards on that, and I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
No, it does. It does somewhat. And I think you're 100% right that we have all this economics at play that doesn't balance well with maintaining healthy populations of animals. And we prioritize human interests and human access and human convenience more so than anything else. And it affects the way that it affects the landscape for animals, and it affects what access they have. It affects what food they have. It affects where they can go, and then obviously that has an effect on the environment. And then the environment doesn't care. Droughts will come when a drought comes, and if an animal is poorly placed, the drought doesn't care. It comes through and it wipes out animals. I believe in the preservation of animals, and I believe in the well-being of animals, but this might ruffle some feathers, but we're here to talk truth, right? And take look at things under the rocks. But I personally don't have an issue with animals becoming extinct. I don't understand why we put this sacred value, and I use that word intentionally, sacred, not in a religious sense, because I think that people who aren't religious have this same experience where we all value life, and for some reason we value complexity and variety. And when we get all uppity when we lose access or when we lose variety, and so when you see a certain species go extinct, there's a loss there, and we interpret that loss as, we put the bad stamp on it. We're like, bad, that's bad, we can't have loss. But that's what's happened in nature for millions, billions of years, is things come and things go. If you want to take that same lens, you could even apply that to humanity. That humanity will come and humanity will go, and whether how that fits into a religious faith-based discussion, I don't know. But you could take that interpretation if you want. And if a certain species of deer disappeared, I would be sad, but I don't think it would necessarily be a bad thing. It might be bad, but then it also might be good, because that species again may been putting pressure on some part of the ecosystem, or it just there's not enough prey to control that animal, or it's a prey animal and it's doing too much damage to herbivores or whatnot. So I find it fascinating. We live in this day and age where everything's PC and everything has the highest value and everything has no value, but we still treat it like it has value. And so when a certain animal's at risk of going extinct, we all lose our mind and we all rally around the cause when we might not. There's probably better things to do. I don't want people to hear me saying that we shouldn't be preserving animals that are at risk of going extinct, because I definitely think we should. But I think we need to check our attitude and the way that we think about it, because I think it's skewed and we don't understand. The issue is that most people don't understand the reasons why they feel things, and they haven't thought things through. They just kind of go with the mob. And when one person stands on a pedestal and shouts really, really loudly, and it seems like everything that they're shouting is PC and kind of socially acceptable, there's a pressure to follow the herd in that direction, whether that is right or wrong. And I'm not an agent of chaos, but I do encourage people to think critically and go, is that right? Is that true? Just because, diversity is a good thing, does that mean that we should always promote and support diversity? Not in terms of cultural diversity. I'm specifically talking about animal diversity. I definitely think cultural diversity should be celebrated and pushed. Let me get that clear so that soundbite doesn't leak into the internet. But I find that interesting. Let me ask specifically, before you said that that there's a satisfaction that you feel in killing. It sounds harsh when I say it this way, but I want to phrase it this way so that we can dig into it. There's a satisfaction that you feel killing an animal. What is that? Where does that come from? Do you understand that? Have you thought about that?
Two things I've thought about. One was 9 minutes ago, you said we're going to have one more question and wrap up. Now, also,
this is a good question. It's a multi-pronged question.
It's great. I love it. Yes, I have thought about it. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know whether, I could speculate and say it was, primal and it's in humans for generations to harvest animals and whatnot. But I don't know. I enjoy. When you're playing a stupid computer game or something, and something happens and a little coin pops up and you run over and get it and it goes into your kitty. It's like that happens. So a little bit of me gets stronger every time I do that.
If we go out hunting and I'm beside you when you shoot a big stack, I'm going to go ding,
and I'll run over and grab the coin.
You grab the coin. Leave the deer, grab the coin.
I don't know if that's a good. Well,
I think that's a good analogy.
But it's a good analogy. So I gain something from every life I harvest, right? Whether it be energy, whether it be memories, whether it be feelings and emotions, whether it be education. I personally grow every time I harvest something. And to do that, I have to harvest something. So, yeah. I mean, I can watch a herd of deer and learn from them and their movements and things, but sustenance, energy, things like that come from eating meat. Stories, communication, community comes from sitting around my trophy room here, having a yarn about all these deer that are in here or whatever. So something comes from every life that I take. There's no life that goes, oh yeah, righto. Like even if it's just shooting a bulk amount of rabbits because I'm on a property and there's way too many of them. My dogs eat that, and then they're energized and we go and have fun and do something else. So there's always something that comes from it. A little coin pops up and I grab it and put it in my purse.
Your dear kitty.
I've got I don't have a purse. That was a terrible.
No, that's the soundbite.
There's your soundbite. dodging his purse.
I'm gonna give that soundbite to Matt, and he can put it on his little podcast machine and, and push it every time.
Thank you for shouting out for my podcast. So how do you feel about that answer?
I think that you've articulated something really interesting that most hunters can't, or won't, or haven't thought about, and I love the way that you use the word harvest, because you referenced harvesting the experience, the animal, the resource, the memories, the like, it's so much richer. Like what you're harvesting and what you're grabbing, those coins are not just, it's not just meat. And I think that's a really rich and beautiful and interesting way to look at it, that when you're out there hunting, like that every hunter, and I'm not saying shooters, every hunter is a harvester, whether they're a trophy hunter or not, because what you're taking things away from that hunt and that experience, whether it's an animal, whether it's a rack of antlers, whether it's meat or a hide or a memory or an emotion or a experience of community and brotherhood or whatever it is. And I use brotherhood in the sense of men and women connecting, not gender-based. There is something to be harvested from that. And I think that the kill is part of that. It is a method of harvesting something from that, or gaining a deeper level of harvest, maybe.
And I don't want to take away from those times when I don't harvest something, like physically kill something. It doesn't happen very often. I set myself up for success regularly, and I do that in lots of different ways. But if I'm using that coin analogy again, I would say that if I go away on a trip and don't harvest anything, ding, I still get a 50-cent coin out of it. But yeah, when I harvest something, it's a $2 coin, or there's just that little bit more value in it for me to bring home. And I see it, if I come home from a hunting trip and I didn't get anything, the 50 cents is in my pocket and my wife might not see it. But if I bring home the $2, well, then she gets $1 and I get $1. Like, she's a little bit, not that she's happy about it, but she can see the value. There's a physical value in it for the family. So I can share that so true. Easier.
That's, that's something that I haven't reflected on. That is very, very true, in that whenever I go out hunting, my boys, Eli and Parker, who are 10 and 8, they say to me, "Dad, I hope you get a deer or a pig or a goat or whatever it is I'm hunting. I hope you come back with a set of antlers." And then you take that expectation right on. You carry it, and as a father and as a man, as a provider, as a hunter, you want to succeed. So there is a standard that you're trying to meet. And so when you pull the trigger and you get the hit, you hear that thud, or you see the animal drop, or maybe you shot it through the heart and you're seeing it spring up from the adrenaline, or whatever that feedback is that indicates you've killed that animal. All of what that ding is, what that coin is represents all that expectation fulfilled, right? It's like, man, my kids are going to be excited. Man, I get to show my friends what I've accomplished because I've got this rack. Or, man, I get to fill a freezer. Or, man, I'm going to have this beautiful hide that I can then put in, my kid's bedroom or my lounge room or whatever. It's filling that expectation or meeting that expectation when quite possibly you might not have. There was a chance that you potentially didn't. And I've come back from hunts, and the boys have met me at the door and they've been like, and there's kind of this gasp, and they look at you and then they look at the car and they see it's empty and they go, "Oh, thanks, well, good, welcome home, Dad." And that's okay. Like, that's fine. It's good. That's not a bad thing. But when you come home and you're like, check this out, like, let's come back to the car and look what I got. There is great satisfaction, and that's not something that I've actually reflected on, that contributes to that feeling of how you. It's a great way to explain why you can enjoy the death of an animal.
And I just want to admit that I've never ever considered this analogy, but I'm really loving the coin analogy. So, in what you were saying there,
you're trying to justify your purse, Dodge.
I love it. It's a merce. If anything, it's a merce, right? But if you harvest something and I'm going to stick with the $2 value because it's easy with Australian currency. You bring home $2. These things on the wall here, every time someone sits in this room and I have a yarn about it and they ask me about it, they get 10 cents.
Yeah.
And then, I get to keep the bulk of it, but I get to share the reward, and I get to share and I reference this because it's not long that I've finished this trophy room. And when I say finished, I mean put skirting boards around it, and it's due to get painted next week or week after. But I sat in here on Friday night with 3 other hunters from our hunting club, and we sat in here until 1 o'clock in the morning and just spoke about not just hunting, but everything. But it was fueled by sitting around in community, and a lot of it was fueled by this room and the stories. So I could, drop some coins in their bank account so that they would build up their experiences through my stories and invigorate them to go out and do something. And I'm not saying that, I was doing that on purpose. It's just a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
So your kids, you're dropping a little bit of money in their piggy bank every time you come back. If you come back with 50 cents, you still drop a bit of money in, but it's only 5 cents because you're telling them about the story or the journey or who you went with. You didn't shoot anything, but it's not all about that. And it's not.
Yeah.
But if you can bring back $2, it's much easier to split them at 50 cents each and, get them out and show them and see that smile on their face. So, yeah.
Yeah. And let's extend the analogy, because I think we can extend it even further, and maybe this is stretching it
further. Go.
Yeah, exactly. People are like, the people who tuned out long ago. They tuned out when we started talking about
gems. Yeah, their bank account must be full.
They were like, truth, this is good. Oh, faith, no. Ding. I'll be able to see it. We're talking about podcast stats before the episode recorded. I'll be able to see it in the stats. Massive drop-off.
Dropped off at 42 minutes. Boo.
Yeah. No, I think we can extend the analogy even further in that whenever you go hunting, it costs something of you. To go out there, your time, your effort, your energy. Yes, we do it because we love it, but it also, especially when you first start hunting, this is probably more so the case when you first start hunting, it takes time and effort and energy to go out and scout spots and see nothing. And you can get easily discouraged. And every time you go out, you're taking a little bit from the kitty. So when you go out and you become successful and you bring home $2, well, and you've got something on the wall that is literally a manifestation of your success right there, planted right there, whether it's a spiker or whether it's a hide on the ground, it doesn't matter what it is, but whatever that symbol of success is, that equates to money in your little purse that next time you go out, you can take from. Because the reality is, and I know this is the case because I've spoken to lots of people who considered themselves hunters before, but are no longer active hunters. Now, they don't call themselves non-hunters, but the reality is they are not a hunter anymore. But it's because they started and they got discouraged and they ran out of money and they went into deficit and then they went bankrupt and then they stopped. But if you have even just one hide, the scrawniest, scroungiest little doe, yearling doe, whatever it is, but you have that hide and that represents success for you, that's money in the bank. And that's something that you can go away with and go out hunting and draw from.
And it just struck to my mind, I was just looking at it then on my phone. You'll see that in the video. But the parable of the talents, the coins.
Yeah.
We're
going to extend it even further. We're going to take an analogy and turn it into a parable, further abstracted.
I didn't think about it, but can you see the relationship between that parable and this conversation?
Yes, okay. Do you want to flesh it out? Do you want to exhort the listeners using this analogy?
Not particularly in too much detail. You can read it in the Bible.
Yeah.
So for those listening, Matthew 25:14-30.
This podcast is supported by the New King James Version.
Good. It's a good one to read too. Because anyway, I read King James.
Forces you to read.
It does force you to think, as does this podcast. Right. So it's talking about what you do with talents being coins, I suppose. What do you do when someone gives you some? Do you bury them? Do you go out and invest them? And I think my analogy plays well into, I spend a lot of time investing in the future of our industry, passion, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. I give that coin to a lot of people. I don't keep it in my own bank. I like to, spread that ding coin around, whether it be through meat, whether it be through stories, whether it be through taking new people out so that they get the ding. I hadn't thought about that analogy linking into that story until momentarily ago, because I hadn't thought about the analogy prior to talking about it. So, yeah.
I think you're spot on. I think there is great value in using your knowledge, experience, access, whatever it is, even meat, to encourage other hunters, whether they're new or whether they're old and jaded, or whether they're just a hunter, well-rounded hunter. Yeah. There is value in sharing, and there is value in community. And so we might leave with that said, with that positive little rounding off, we might leave it there. And I do want to thank you, Dodge, for coming on and for sharing your wisdom and your experience and your stories, and for being truthful, and also for encouraging me to do the same, to push back on me, because it's not always an easy thing to do.
No, thank you for having me. And I just, to the listeners, just go and invest. Go and spend that money that you get from being in the outdoors and harvesting animals and whatnot. Just invest it in others, because you've created your community with Australian Hunting Club. I'm heavily invested in our local hunting club. It's just the future of what we do. So thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the time you've given me to share some of my views and opinions.
Well, that's it. Thank you for getting to the end of this episode. Honestly, I really appreciate your attention. It was a longer one. We kind of got in the weeds in some of these topics, which are pretty deep, talking about truth and death and lies and all these different things, but I certainly got something out of that conversation with Dodge, and I hope that you did as well. Look, Dodge is a fantastic guy. He's an authentic guy. He's doing some great things in the Australian hunting scene and industry and community, so I encourage you to go support him. Go check out the Endless Pursuits podcast and what him and Matt are doing over there. Also, if you're interested in that customized hunting, guided hunting experience, go check out Accurate Hunts. It's a great way to support Dodge and what he's doing. Also, if you haven't checked out the Australian Hunters Club, go do that, australianhunters.com.au. A lot of what Dodge and I spoke about tonight skirted around the topic of community and the importance of community. And honestly, while it's great to go out and hunt alone, there's so much benefit and beauty and complexity that can be harvested and mined from being in a community. It's a great way to learn and grow as well. So I encourage you to check that out. Australian Hunters Club, australianhunters.com.au. Otherwise, thank you for your time and your attention, and hopefully I see you in a hunting video soon. Bye.